I would like to share what Elon did in response to Ukrainian Prime Minister's tweet, and he said that he's going to update the Starlink so it can be charged with the car charger, and roaming will be on, so it could be used on a traveling vehicle.
Ah, that's awesome. That's actually particularly cool because that will enable boats and van lifers to have Starlink, and it's bigger than it might seem. This whole van life movement, where people are moving into vans and with showers built into the van, beds and refrigerators and everything. The little kitchen, little bathroom, little bedroom, all built into a nice little van. And when you add Starlink to that and a 50-inch screen and a camera, you can do your Skype calls or your Zoom calls or everything that you need, and go way. If you get the 4-wheel drive version, then you can now go into parts of the world that have previously never been visited by human beings, like deep, deep, deep into the Amazon, for example, assuming you have enough
That's really
clear,
fun.
clear sky above to connect to the satellites. So
Wake up to different scenery every morning.
yeah, so it's a very interesting concept, and that concept gets even more interesting when you consider the fact that Tesla's about to do an electric van. So, and that gets even more interesting when you realize the plan is that the top of the van has cantilevering solar panels that come out like wings, which then act like awnings or shade coverings when extended, and collect a whole lot of energy for the car. And then you can really go deep into the Amazon because you don't have to worry about fuel, or you could build in a water atmospheric water harvester, so you could pull water, fresh water, constantly every day into the vehicle from the atmosphere, as long as you're in an environment that has more than 20% humidity, which is most of the world. And it gets even better because there's a Swedish company called Orbital Systems, which has created a genius way to recycle water inside of homes, and particularly showers, but you can do homes as well, and run a shower for 20 minutes on 2 liters of water. And then now you have your own water supply being caught from the air to take heated long showers, and it's drinkable, by the way. And you've got your water. You need your food, of course, but you'll have your energy and your water and your transportation and your connectivity, your internet, all covered. The only thing you're missing is your food at that point.
Okay,
Tyler,
so
I just
Tyler, sorry, Ben, combine that with the hydroponic solution of growing your vegetable
Yeah.
and recycling your waste like urine, using those cellular membranous structure to harvest harvest oxygen out of it, and using that water for your hydroponic to grow your own vegetables.
Ben, you were going to
I
say?
was just going to say I tweeted. I was just going to say I lived like that for 3 years on a van, with 16 years ago, by the way, with satellite internet, even 16 years ago. It was fascinating time. We did have our own supplies. We literally lived full time on a vehicle for years. There's a Telegraph article about it I've tweeted. It was very interesting, though. Eventually, we realized we were actually still completely dependent on others, because even though we were independent for about a week, about once a week, we absolutely had to get rid of wastewater, black water, and grey water. We absolutely had to get more energy, because at this latitude, solar alone was nowhere near enough. So in our case, that was diesel. We still had to pay this internet service provider an extortionate amount for their satellite broadband. But we also had to get rid of our waste, as in our rubbish, and we had to top up with fresh water. It'd be great if the fresh water was solved now, but I suspect pulling it out of the atmosphere would be a lot of energy. So it was fascinating. Why the reason why we eventually stopped was because we actually, where we thought we were doing this for freedom, we actually ended up realizing just how dependent we were on others doing that. But it was an interesting era.
Ben, I'm just curious, looking back at 16 years later, with all this modern technology and what's available now, if you didn't have those same challenges, would you do it again?
Yeah, not much has changed. I do keep an eye on it. Very, very little has changed. The solar would still not be viable at most latitudes on a vehicle. You've got nowhere near enough roof area. Fresh water, it's going to be challenging. It's going to be challenging. It's either going to use a lot of energy, or you're going to need a lot of area to collect it. Waste. What do you do with your waste? Your rubbish, your black waste, etc. What do you do about food? You need a big land area. So it's. I think you're more dependent, unfortunately, than I would like. And I don't think that much has changed at all in the last 16 years in terms of how independent we could be. Slightly, you get 50% more solar power, but it was useless. Solar was so useless back then that we didn't even have it. It wasn't even worth having because, it was a big vehicle. It had a washer dryer, domestic washer dryer. It had like a waste compactor. It had like an electric oven. So it wasn't lean on energy use. And because of high energy use, it just wasn't even worth having solar. It would make no impact. So it wasn't even worth the money to try and put it on the roof, interestingly, back then. Now it may just about be worth it, but still, the big energy had to come from a diesel generator, which was a bit sad.
Okay, so now we get into the news. Do we want to get right into the top biggest headlines of the day, or do we want to go through around the Ukraine updates, as anybody might have something interesting
I've got
on
something.
You do, go ahead.
I got something too.
Who was the first one in there?
I'm Jeff.
Jeff,
Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah, this is from The Verge. I tweeted it out to you a little while ago. It says, the headline reads, the BBC resurrects World War II era shortwave broadcast as Russia blocks news of Ukraine invasion.
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Sure. I say BBC resurrects World War II era shortwave broadcast as Russia blocks news of Ukraine invasion.
Got it. Okay. All right. And
I was right on my prediction, Tyler.
What was your prediction?
The back channeling
ham
would
radio?
be the most commonly used like social media platform. CB radios.
Yeah. And ham radio, yeah. So,
and ham.
Yeah, and then on that point, Elon Musk did a tweet recently reminding people that Starlink is currently the only non-Russian controlled communication channels available in Ukraine, which is quite interesting. Yes.
And I shared that tweet with, I think, TNATW on Twitter, where Elon Musk responded to Ukrainian Prime Minister, providing this update immediately so the Starlink can be charged with a car charger and is available for roaming. And the next tweet that he did in response to a Russian Roscosmos space agency's person, I forgot his name, who said that the ISS would fall down either in India or some other countries because Russia is going to stop selling their rockets to United States. And as we all know, Russia and United States have long ongoing cooperation in terms of how they run ISS together. But in response to that tweet, Elon Musk posted a picture of a SpaceX rocket, and guess what? We don't need Russian rockets anymore because we have SpaceX rocket for that.
Yeah, it was kind of weird because they even said that the Americans can fly to space on their broomsticks or something to that effect. And
yes, he said that.
Yeah, and Elon said SpaceX is, selling American broomsticks or something.
The Harry Potter way.
It was funny.
And but what's funny about that is they've gone around that once before, where years ago Russia said America could get to space on a trampoline, and then when about a year ago the SpaceX did a rather impressive connection to the International Space Station and says Operation Trampoline complete or something like that, on the live stream. And now the SpaceX's program is more robust in every way imaginable than the Russian program. So I don't know why this guy would be willing to put his foot in his mouth a second time. It's really peculiar. So
I think I've got an answer, Tyler. I think it's small feet, big mouth.
That's funny. So I found one of the most disturbing things I've seen ever and I just retweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account. I will try to pin it to the top of the Clubhouse room, and Cheryl, hopefully you can, and somebody can pin it to the top of the the Twitter space. And what it is it's a video clip from CBS News, who was doing a live news update from Kiev, and the reporter standing in front of the camera as usual, with some landmark building in the background, and he's basically finished with what he wants to say. And after he finishes, this massive, it's a night, this is happening at night, in the middle of the night, and there's a massive flash that lights up the sky bright as day. And he and someone else next to him off camera turn around and they were like, what the hell was that? And he's asking the cameraman, because the cameraman was looking that direction. And they can't really figure, they don't know what it was. And then people have been sending in, there's responses to him on Twitter that are replying to that piece. And I'm going to share the next one with you now. And this next video that is a response to the first video, and it's obviously from Ukraine. It's got Ukrainians in the video, responding on the video. Watch, please, I beg you, watch this video. This might be the most important. This is potentially, if it's what I believe it is, incredibly important.
Tyler, it is a thermobaric bomb.
So please watch this video, because I had no idea how incredibly, insanely massive and destructive these are. I had no clue.
It's only a short step away from being a full-scale atomic bomb, and if you're within the blast radius, so if you imagine the Lebanese explosion, which we got a lot of footage of, because obviously there was a lot of video of it, that was not a thermobaric bomb, and look at the blast damage that it did, but it was very limited relatively. These are much more dangerous, and it sucks all the oxygen out of the air, so it turns the entire blast radius into a combustion engine and just rips all the oxygen out of your lungs and kills you. And I really don't see how this is much less than a nuclear bomb. It's just by definitions, it's really a disgrace.
Yeah,
and they use this extensively in Syria, which is where they fermented the first wave of European disaffection with the mass exodus, and this is something that also should be watched as is one of their known playbooks.
Yeah, when I saw it, I thought, oh, duck and cover. Oh, that looks kind of odd and strange. It even had somewhat resembled a mushroom cloud, so the heat and the temperature is quite close to a nuclear explosion.
Yeah,
one of the things we should be very sure about here is not the oxygen that it actually it consumes the oxygen. Yes, it does, but what it does, it actually makes a vacuum. Since it consumes all the oxygen, which is about 20% of air, it actually, since it's so much energy in the bomb here, so you actually end up with a sphere of about 100 meters where there is absolute vacuum. The thing is here that it literally implodes your lungs. You actually burst all the alveolars, the small bubbles in your lungs. They detonate inside your lungs, and there have been, if you're close enough, it will rip your rib cage open by being exposed to that kind of vacuum in a very, very short matter. So what they say is that there's almost no parts left of the people, and yes, that's true. And the same is with the buildings, because if you remove all the air, all the walls collapse, and the buildings just falls like a deck of cards. This is a horrific weapon to use in populated areas. If you go to YouTube and Google Moab, MOAB, Mother of All Bomb, and Afghanistan, you will see how America's used that against fortified fortresses in the mountains. And I can see a use for it there, because what they actually do, they detonated the bomb at the entrance to the labyrinths of caves that the Taliban or ISIS had there. And it killed people up to 300 meters from the entrance just by throwing them through the whole labyrinth of tunnels by removing the air at the entrance. So this is as close you come to a nuke. This is more like a neutron bomb, Johan, than.
Yeah, and the Russians have the father of all bombs, and that's 4 to 6 times larger than the Moab. So the FOAB is the Russian counterpart.
When was this? When did this happen?
And as you say, ducking and running has no value because it doesn't matter whether you're indoors or outdoors, it just explodes you. You are the combustion engine, as Johan said.
And the thing
Tyler,
is here,
can
we
you
should be aware that the clip that Tyler put up first, this is a very, very experienced war reporter.
Right.
I have seen him in clips from all over the world, and he didn't know what hit them. And the same with the cameraman, who's also a known war reporter. So this is something they never have seen anywhere else before. That's why, what was that? Yeah, of course, this is not a weapon that is meant to use in suburb areas where they are now. Sorry.
Tyler, can you please put the second video up on Twitter as well? I don't see it. I can't.
Also, if you could answer Emma's question, she was asking when this happened.
It's, well, one at a time. The video is currently at the top of both Twitter Space and Clubhouse. Again, I'm begging you to watch it. And to answer your question, yeah, this apparently there's been 4, according to the person who tweeted the video. He says in the tweet, it says, so far there's been 4, and this is one of them that was caught on video. And somebody did the math on this because there's a large light flash, like a bolt of lightning, and even much more intense than a bolt of lightning, honestly. And then there's a loud boom. That's on it, and you can tell the distance based on the separation between the visual, the speed of light, and the speed of sound. So you can tell how far away it is. And somebody calculated in the video pinned to the top of each room that it's about 2.4 kilometers. And it's still very intense.
It's about a kilometer for every 3 seconds, Tyler. It's pretty much as simple as that.
Yeah. And depending on temperature, even, you can get very specific. So the next point I want to make was, I've been to, having lived in Japan for many years, I did make a trip down to Hiroshima, and there's a nuclear museum. Yeah. And if you ever have the chance, I encourage you to go to it. Although, cancel anything else you plan that day. Do it at the end of the day. And it still shakes me to my core, the memory of going to that museum. And one of the main things that you'll take away from going to that museum is the word picadon, which is clearly a Japanese neologism, which Japanese are very known for doing. They make up lots of words. And the word picadon is the concatenation of the word pika, which means flash, and don, which means like the sound dawn, like boom. So it could easily have been called pika boom, or flash boom would be kind of like the English onomatopoeia equivalent.
Pika pika means flashy.
Yeah, so pika means flash, and like on a camera. So picadon, it is what it sounds like. It's a flash boom. And that's what they called, that's what the locals in Hiroshima called the bomb, picadon, because there was a massive flash that was blinding, and literally in many cases people went blind from it. And then a massive boom that came later, depending on how far away you were from the flash. And watching this video that's pinned, I say all this because when I watched this video that's now pinned to the top of the rooms, I could not think of the word picadon, because it's precisely what happens. There's a massive flash, and then a delay, and then a massive boom. And it very disturbing, incredibly disturbing. I'm very glad that got caught on camera. There's no sane, and I've heard other experts talking about how these bombs should be considered war crimes and banned, just like nuclear bombs and everything else. I honestly didn't know what they were talking about until I saw this video, and then I challenge anybody who sees this video pinned to the top of this room to argue that this should not be considered a war crime. But it doesn't matter who it's used by, even by the U.S. in any context. I don't care what the context is. As Nicholas has said and others have said, it's a baby step away from a nuclear bomb, and it's a minor distinction nearly at this point. So
I think the question is exactly that: is we're in the business of minor differences, minor exceptions. At what point do we draw this line and say there's a guy who's using weapons of mass destruction against basically the world, and whilst not wanting to accelerate a world war scenario, what is the point of having these weapons and spending trillions of dollars and sacrificing, human life if we're not going to stand up when required? When does never again mean never again when you're facing down someone who has proven that he is a force for bad? And we know that it's not Russia, we're talking about Putin. At what point do we ask ourselves this question? Why? Why are we standing back? Because they're not in NATO. Then it's like there are people being murdered with armaments that are destroying them as if it was a nuclear explosion. So, where is that line? When do we start saying, "What the heck is this? What's the point?"
Okay,
that's a great question.
If you haven't seen the video, please take 10 seconds to click on the link at the top of Twitter Space or the Clubhouse room. You kind of owe it to yourself to understand what this is about.
Can I respond to Nicholas?
Yeah, David, go. And then it looks like Ken is on Twitter Space today, which is great to see. And then I want to hear from Ken. Go ahead, David.
Nicholas, that question was,
Tyler,
my mind
Twitter
is
Space.
my mind is just. Let me start with this. What Tyler is relayed in terms of his experience at Hiroshima, it's a bucket list experience that everybody, if you can in your life, go to see it, because you can feel the souls there. Okay, that was one point. The other is, Nicholas, that was the Cold War, and there's that's why we try to take the high road of obeying some kind of structure, some kind of legal context, some kind of we do what we can to try to take the high road, and that's Reagan for everything he I don't agree with any of his economics that he unleashed, but we had the ability to wage that economic war that crushed the USSR. And so, with tears in my eyes right now, I'm just saying we are at that question right now.
So we've got Sophie's choice.
Let me finish one last thing. One last thing. Something was mentioned in Piotr's room with regards to Vitaly. He said he captured something. He was born in Russia, but he's Ukrainian, if I recall correctly. He captured something just that needs to be like that whole bumper sticker thing, right? It needs to become the very key voice. He said that the Ukrainians are fighting to liberate Russia. And if you understand what communism did, communism subjugated the human spirit. And this is hopefully the last battle we're going to have with that flawed, just, that little prison that ideal set forth on humanity. Now it's being led by criminal syndicates. I'll just say it like that. But that's the question. That's the question. So what can we do? What else can we do? Let's go down the checklist of everything else we can do before we do what we all know
Guess what? We have a no-fly zone and put the pressure. And if Russia wants to up the ante and we end up in World War III, then we end up in World War III. That's Nicholas's point. We could do a no-fly zone, which is relatively non-lethal. It's actually, quite frankly, a defensive move to stop them from killing people. And if they take out a Russian jet, because and Putin wants to up the ante, then we'll have to deal with that. But that's something we can do.
Yeah.
Everything's lethal. Come on. I mean, you guys got to be real. So let's stop talking about nothing's lethal. Just for those who are talking about doing something, not to put you on spot, you just got to decide what are you willing to lose when you enter. And I'm not saying do nothing or do
I agree.
something. You
I
just
think
got to
that's
be
right.
willing. Well, let me finish. Let me finish. You got to be willing to say, what are you willing to lose? And when your adversary knows, especially when you state it up front, what you're not willing to lose, then they're willing to go as far as they're willing to go. The other thing is, David, thanks for mentioning Hiroshima. I went back to look at the pictures myself. It is very breathtaking. And I went there and I went to their Peace Museum. And I tell you, it's the only museum other than the Holocaust Museum that even before I could finish and sit in the reflection area, it makes your voice and your body quiver.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's it. Thank you.
We have the cure for this cancer, and we have to be willing to use it. Otherwise, it isn't a cure. And I have to say, from my own perspective, we know the best time to have got rid of Putin was yesterday, and yesterday, and yesterday, and the day before that. So tomorrow is going to be worse than today. And the question is, if you take out insurance, you have to understand that if your neighbor's house is burning, at some point, your house is going to be set on fire too. And we've seen this before in every generation. It's called fitness versus truth. That is at the center of the self-sovereign conscious agent theorem that is pinned to it. We say lies to ourselves. This man is not going to stop. He's not stopped with the Syrians. He assisted a murderer to murder his people. He created a humanitarian crisis. He's not stopping. Read the work of Alexander Durgin. Read. It is a playbook. You must understand that this is not going to stop because we are acting like Neville Chamberlain acted in 1930s. You
There's
got a
another
piece
key.
of paper. You're trying to keep this at bay with a piece of paper when we have the deterrent, but only if
So
we
did you
decide
have
to
the
show
same
that we'll
passion
use
with
it.
Congo? Did you have the same passion with Congo? Did you have the same passion at the moment when Rwanda was happening? Did you have the same
Yes, I
passion?
did.
Let me
I
finish.
did.
Let me
I
finish.
did.
Let me finish. Did people have the same, not you, did people have the same passion with the disappeared from Argentina,
No,
Operation Condor? Did we really have the same passion? And then are we really willing to insert ourselves into governments and start taking out people? Just beware of the consequences.
I've never
I could deal
There's a
with
understood
difference
that
any
with
consequences.
there's a
I'm not
thinking
difference with
of
what
advocating.
Nicholas
honesty.
is saying. I agree with him.
Just because we haven't done that
Not just Ukraine.
before,
It's not just
why doesn't it?
Ukraine. If he does, if he gets Ukraine, he'll go to Poland. Then he'll go to Moldavia. He'll keep going. And then when you go to
Exactly.
a NATO ally, what are we going to do then? Say when all of a sudden we won't defend a NATO ally because we're worried about World War III? I mean, this is NATO's an artificial construct, by the way. There is actually no reason we couldn't defend Ukraine if we wanted to. I mean, Reagan sent troops into Grenada to overturn a military coup there and rescue our medical students. I mean, they weren't that we had no military alliance there, so we have to
That
make
was a
that
rounding
decision. I
error.
mean, because quite frankly, we're going to be faced with that decision. I mean, we can't
So
be
I have a
afraid
go
of World
ahead.
War III because Putin will keep pushing us, and Nicholas is right, and he'll push into the NATO countries too. I mean, it's where are we going to make that decision when he's outside of France?
So I have a question for some of these, for some of you guys who have experience in the military or this stuff. I've been reading in some articles now for a few days that a lot of people said that the first 10 days are crucial, that if Ukraine can hold off for the first 10 days, that there's going to be major disadvantages for Russia. And if that's the case, that's a couple of days from now. I mean, is this something that other people have read or do you have information about? I mean, are they waiting it out for the first 10 days to see what's going to happen, a couple of more days to see if indeed maybe Russia is going to be able to back down, even though they've gone this far already? But what is this 10-day report that I've been reading in some places? Anybody know?
Am
I
I okay to
can't.
speak?
I'm sorry.
Emma,
Oh yeah, sorry.
have you been trying to speak?
Oh well, no, I don't understand the whole. Just because we haven't done something in other wars, uh, that I mean, using that as a justification not to do anything now is just. I mean, aren't we supposed to become better as people, and to each other, not like stay shitty, kind of. Um, yeah, I don't really understand what people are waiting for. I think the longer this goes on, the worse it's gonna get, and he's not gonna stop. Obviously, he's not gonna stop.
We
I can
don't
see
want
any
World
reason.
War Three. I certainly don't want my kids going to war. Uh,
So
uh,
if you don't do anything now, you think they're not gonna be a World War Three?
no,
I,
but there's a
I think there's a
nuclear.
difference.
There's a
Sorry.
difference between. Anyway, we know what the governments have decided. NATO is not going in. Biden has said so. Uh, Boris Johnson had said the same. So I think we can speculate, but just because you want a war, we're not going to have a war. And the majority of people want to support Ukraine, but do not want boots on the ground, British or US boots
So
on the
we're just
ground.
going to let them go to the slaughter. So let's be honest with ourselves, like I suggested a week
We
or
have
two
been
ago
doing
with the
that
metagame
across the
is
globe.
right. That's fine. So it's right. We're saying that because nobody came forth and challenged what happened in Syria, although a lot of people did try to point it out that it was Putin's move, we allowed him to do that. We allowed him to cause that problem. It was him standing behind her. He's, doing the same with the Turkish, and they're rattling with each other. And each time we've effectively said, just let it go. We need the zero interest rate policy. We need the supply chains intact. We need to do all of these things, right? And I think we can all say that in every situation, we had a choice whether we were going to save these people or not, and we didn't make that choice. That's true. And it's not anyone in this room's fault because no one was, well, people were involved in voting for their governments, but everybody is trying to save themselves. The question is, at what point do we use a deterrent rather than be told, if you come anywhere near us, we're going to start escalating in a way that it terrifies everybody? So we're being forced into a corner because one person is willing to use his weapons, and clearly the other side is not willing to use its weapons. And then if it doesn't get what it wants, it just has to ratchet it up to this very fine, negligible line written in words where we all have to sit on the sidelines and watch these people get slaughtered for obviously exactly the same zero reason as they slaughtered the Syrians and they
But when was
slaughtered people
the
in other
last
places.
war?
So
When
that's
was
what we're
the
saying.
last
So
war
let's
that
wait for the slaughter.
actually solved anything? When was the last war that didn't leave a country in a worse state than it was before? Just like Afghanistan or other countries or Libya or any other country. When was it the last time? World War II. But now we have different weapons. We have weapons that can destroy the whole world. So go ahead and go in, destroy the whole world. This guy is all in his 70s. All the presidents are in their 70s. They don't give a fuck. And then we all die. And then we are in a worse state than we were before, because that's the modern war. The modern war leaves countries in a worse state than they were before. Please check out all the recent wars. Look
Carl?
at Yugoslavia, still in a worse state than it was before. All the countries where we went in full of testosterone left this place in a state worse than it was before. And the bombs can reach here in the US
So
and
we shouldn't
everywhere.
face down evil. We should just, let evil reign. That's what it sounds like.
The people
No, it's not
themselves
my
have to
job.
stick up for themselves. The
Nicholas, it's
people
not our
themselves have to
job.
solve it. It's not, the US cannot solve it, and the
Okay, it's
UK
good to hear the
cannot solve
opinions.
Can
I
it.
we
mean,
let Katrina?
I
Can we
understand
let
your
her finish?
viewpoint.
Can we let her finish,
Hey,
please?
Professor Asif, you know when it was your job and when it was the UK's job, and we missed that, and the whole world's job, the Western world, we missed the opportunity, is when Putin introduced a radioactive isotope into your country to kill one or two people. When he introduced a nerve gas agent into a restaurant because he wanted to kill a political enemy. I mean, we did nothing about that. And if we had
I
been
agree with
stronger
you
about
there.
that, maybe he wouldn't be where we are today. Okay, and that was
Well,
your
you need to
country.
read it. You
So
need to read a lot of our declassified information on things we did too.
I want to.
Exactly.
Exactly.
offer a
What is this
multi-dimensional?
whataboutism? What is the whataboutism? How is today related to what about we didn't do this and what about we didn't? Let's just say we're all good
I'm
people.
sorry,
We
being
wouldn't have made those
emotional about this
decisions.
won't help. It won't help being emotional about this. We have to look at data, what actually happened in the last wars, what helped, what didn't. And what didn't help is go in
What ended the
brute
last war was
force
a
and
nuclear bomb, as it happens. That ended the war. So
no,
Nicholas,
that was
Nicholas, let
World
her
War
finish.
II, and only one country had this force. If Germany would have gotten uranium from Portugal and other countries, and Russia would have had a nuclear force, the whole situation would have been very different. And it didn't solve shit, actually. It just blew away Japan, and you're lucky that Japanese are very peaceful people, because if not, you would have created another country that hates the US, just like they did all over the place. And UK too.
do not agree
UK
with
did a
you.
lot of mess in the Middle East and everywhere around the world. And it's time that the Western countries learned from it and they actually solved problems in a rational way.
Okay,
And
please pause
Nicholas,
there.
I just want to tell
Hold
you
on.
something
Hold on.
on
Yeah.
the nuclear Hiroshima. My mentor was the first Allied doctor to arrive at Hiroshima, and that led him. It shocked him so much. His name was late Professor Gustav Born. You can look him up on Wikipedia, and he was the one who discovered the platelet aggregometer. Because when he came back to Oxford, he decided to do a PhD to work out why bleeding happens, and he was the one who discovered platelets aggregate. The mini aspirin everyone is using today is because of uh, uh, um, John Vane, Sir John Vane, who worked with Gus and discovered how aspirin works, and that led to the whole discovery of low dose aspirin. So I just want to say, people who've seen the horrors of war, and when I've spoken with them, they don't want another war. So so I think our governments are doing the right thing, supporting the Ukrainian people. We as companies need to disengage with Russia as things are at the moment. Even universities are doing that. My own university has done the same thing, disengaged with the partnerships that we held. So those are the kind of things we can do, but we can't put boots on the ground.
Okay.
It's a multi-dimension.
Hold
I'm
on,
sorry,
David.
Tyler.
Carl's been patiently waiting with his hand up for quite a while now. Go ahead, Carl.
Okay, if you would allow me, Tyler, I'd like 60 seconds just to quote Gary Kasparov, who's the chairman of the Human Rights Foundation, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
He tweeted a really good thread, and I'm going to take three sections from this and just read it out. The corridors to get weapons, food, medicine in, and refugees out are narrowing and can be closed. Putin can bomb the trains, close the borders with NATO nations. The odds of Russian forces hitting a NATO asset are increasing. And then what? Will we still be watching? If your answer is no, and that you think that if the wing of a Russian jet crosses Polish airspace, and of course NATO will then engage immediately, ask yourself why thousands of Ukrainian civilians dying first matters less than a treaty, and what that says to Putin. That you're honorable or a fool, we know. As I said in 2014 and a fateful week ago, the price of stopping a dictator always goes up. What would have been enough to stop Putin 8 years ago, 6 months ago, or 2 weeks ago is not enough today, and the price will again rise tomorrow. We need to fight. We need to find a way.
Okay. I want to share a bunch of related news headlines to what the conversation that we're having. There's several interesting headlines that relate to all of these points that are being raised. One of them, BB found from CNN about, and nobody's mentioned this yet, the fire and fire in both senses of the word, meaning exchange of bullets and actual combustion, uncontrolled combustion, that's happening at Europe's largest nuclear power plant inside of the Ukraine. And
about
the
to mention that, but everybody's into the fire. Yeah,
yeah,
it's an update because it's like happened 12 hours ago. Originally, there was a fire in that nuclear power plant, but right now, since the Russian troops already occupied that facility, so the fire is distinguished, but it creates another dimension of chaos.
Yeah, one of the ministers or mayors, one of the political leaders of the Ukraine, did a tweet about it saying that if this thing blows up, it'll be approximately 10 times the scale of Chernobyl, which, for those who don't know geography well, my American friends, that Chernobyl was in Ukraine. It is in Ukraine, so they know precisely what the fallout of Chernobyl was. And so for a Ukrainian political leader to say that this would be 10 times the size is not exaggeration. They know very well what the size of that was, and they know what the size of this would be. And it seems that Russia is dancing on a landmine, tip-tap towing on a landmine with this issue, because the fallout from this nuclear power plant, some are saying on news broadcasts, many news outlets are trying to figure out just how serious this situation is. And the footage that I've seen, the experts are saying that this would cause a kind of a nuclear fallout that would have tremendous impact across Europe. So that's one interesting development since we met 24 hours ago. The other is that...
Sorry, Tyler, can I just put a personal note on that before you move on?
Yeah.
I got a message at 17 minutes past midnight, which in Ukraine it would have been about 2 a.m., 17 minutes past 2, from a colleague who lives in the town. And he was messaging through as it was being bombed. And that the point I wanted to make is that our response to him was, can you get out? Because it's very close to the southern occupied territory. And the thousands of people that are stuck there, a lot of them don't feel confident they can even escape the area because the roads around the region, two points, the roads around the region are unknown and a lot of them occupied. There's no certainty that you can even really get north from that area safely. And the other is that there's a lot of rumors going around, and this is anecdotal from my colleague, so take it with a pinch. But there's a lot of rumors about people on the roads being conscripted, men that are found on the roads being conscripted by the Ukrainian forces. So those two fears combined means that even people like my colleague with family, who's absolutely terrified hearing the bombs go off, looking out of his window and seeing the flashes, they still don't feel confident that they can pack their families in a small family car and actually make it anywhere safe.
Okay, so the next one I want to share is that NATO chief accuses Putin of deploying illegal bombs against Ukraine, and that's the issue that we raised earlier about these hyperbaric bombs, and NATO's leader saying that
Tyler, these bombs were actually used in Iraq and Afghanistan as well.
I'm
Daisy cutters.
Yeah, I'm. God. Anyway, the next one's from Bloomberg, that Russia accused of nuclear terrorism as world looks on aghast. That Vladimir Putin was denounced for his recklessness after Ukraine said that Russian forces attacked a nuclear power plant, and that recklessness is now something that he might get him in deep shit if he comes out of this alive. In The Hague, for example. So it says Putin was denounced for his recklessness after the nuclear power plant, prompting calls for an even more robust response to the Kremlin aggression. The next is that, and this is great news, Lukashenko, the Putin puppet in Belarus, says that Belarusian forces will not take part in the Ukraine war, which they were previously expected to do. And one of the most moving videos I've seen out of this entire shit show is a former Belarusian military leader begging, in a very manly way, Belarusians to not stand up in the call to arms to attack their neighbors in Ukraine. And he says one of the strongest things we could do, and that you could do, and that anyone could do, is say no to the call to raise arms against their neighbor. And it's an incredibly moving video. If somebody can find that, it's truly part of what should be the opening, one of the opening scenes in the movie, if that ever gets made about this shit show. It's a great speech that he gives. But that's great news that Belarus is not going to join in. And then there's an article in the LA Times asking, where do you hide a 500-foot yacht? How oligarchs are attempting to hide their boats. And
in Maldives.
Yeah, okay. And then the next is the EU is introducing temporary protection schemes for persons fleeing the war. And where's the last one here? Oh, and Russia says it will no longer sell rocket engines to the United States.
Gosh darn it, SpaceX is going to have to get more orders. I'm sure Musk is shedding tears over that one.
He's terrified, shaking in his billion-dollar boots. So those are just some of the quick...
The tweets are hilarious from the Russian cosmonaut director, though. He's talking about jump on trampolines and fly kites and stuff.
Yeah.
One last quick thing, by the way, and I think it came out 2 days ago, and it relates to this. Even though I just saw it today, somehow Navalny, what's his name, the dissident who's supposedly in jail. He has access to a Twitter account, and he has a big tweet out on this whole thing that people can look at his Twitter account and you can see it.
Okay, I forgot to say the most important one of all, which was NATO has recently just ruled out, and this is apparently within the last hour, NATO has made a decision that they, as of now, are turning down Ukraine's request to create a no-fly zone. NATO nations will not impose a no-fly zone over Ukraine, despite pleas from Ukraine. And the comment from the NATO leader was that they are committed to making sure this doesn't escalate beyond Ukraine, but they are refusing to participate.
Tyler. Once it goes into NATO territory, it's one for all for one. But Ukraine is not in NATO territory, and there's no way I know people are asking. Putting a fly zone means you're in direct conflict with the Russians, right. And that's not going to happen.
Yeah. It seems arbitrary.
He's going to go into Poland because he sees the weakness, and then you'll let me know what you want to do then.
Yeah, it seems arbitrary. Why do thousands of Ukrainians have to die before we decide that a piece of paper no longer matters?
A piece of paper is what keeps us from doing nuclear war.
Yeah, Poland's in NATO, right? As far as I understand, we seem to be talking as if Poland isn't in NATO. I believe it is.
It is.
Yeah,
Poland is NATO. That's my point. But I think what will happen when he goes into NATO, some of the talk here from other people who are in the UK or France or Americans who don't want war are going to say, well, Poland, it's far away and it's the ex-Warsaw Pact, so we can let that go too. I mean, we'll see what the resolve is when they go into Poland.
The U.S. is heavily based in Poland.
If you go on, if you go on somewhere like Flight Radar or one of the other flight tracking software, just go on there, familiarize yourself with it, have a little look. Look at even U.S. military aircraft flying up and down the border between Poland and Ukraine right now. You can go and see that for yourself if you want to see what's actually happening. Just go Flight Radar or any of the others, especially ones that have got good information about military aircraft. You can just see for yourself what's happening. There's plenty of activity on the very eastern NATO frontier.
There's a lot of calculus being used to determine the escalation strategies. Ken, I understand your point with regards. I understand it, but let's take a big deep breath, because we need to remember that the most useful conversation is nuanced a couple levels lower than where we are. But this is what's been unleashed, so it's understandable because it's so emotionally charged existentially, right? So in so many ways, but it's really important that we manage a multivariable conversation here. And so I'll just close with putting two more things on here that need to be on the table. We had a president go to the Twitter handle Vote Vets, and we have a party here in the States that, first of all, the president was withholding weapons from Zelensky. And then we had a party who, as the as the left tried to impeach him for that impeachable offense, we had a whole party kind of just go with the former president. This authoritarianism is not only in China and Russia. The fact that we have a very tenuous situation in our democracy is a part of this calculus as well. I need to make sure that we have that on here as well, because imagine if the former president had gotten another term. Okay, there's a whole different room and a whole bunch of conversation, but he did support this. He not just did, he does in many phrases and words, and just it's kind of, you can't even argue it. Support this, support Putin.
I know
Famous
all
Okay,
of that,
words
but
with
it's all
with
spilled milk at this
genius.
point.
this is a go ahead.
Okay, we got to get into some
Okay.
headlines here, or
One other thing, Tyler, before we go on, please. I would like for everybody to consider something. I mean, I don't want to bring politics. I mean, not Reagan, but the last president and the current president. But I want to ask everybody on the stage, after what's transpired in Ukraine, how good is Americans' word when we've given a country a written agreement that we would support and protect their security, and now we're finding loopholes not to do that? How many other people are going to look at us go moving into the 21st century and say, you know, America and what they tell you and what they put on and sign on paper is as good as a paper that is written on? You know, everybody's here is yelling about, I don't want to go into a war. You know, there are families today that are losing their sons, their children, losing their lives in a country that's far, far away from us, because we have two oceans to kind of protect us. But are we going to wait? Have we learned anything from history that we've lived on this planet for the last 100 some odd years about how these things continue to escalate? Are we going to sit back and wait? I'm going to tell you right now, NATO, if he goes into Poland, Poland is going to be sacrificed. Now, when he starts knocking on the doors of Western Europe, then we'll hear an outcry. But, you know, realistically, we need to understand that if we're going to tell somebody we're going to do something, we need to stand behind it, have a backbone, because the U.S. and Great Britain signed an agreement with Russia. Russia reneged on the agreement. What are we doing? My name is Irvin. Thank you for letting me share.
okay.
I'd like to ask
Irvin,
how many people here have sons or daughters in the military? I've got a son in the Marine Corps and a daughter in the Navy. I'm just curious to see how many people who are advocating war and speaking about it somewhat cavalierly have children or relatives in the military right now. Thank you.
I have my oldest
I
son in the
do.
Swedish Air Force.
I'm a veteran. My brother served 2 terms in Vietnam. He actually volunteered the second time to keep one of my brothers from going to Vietnam. My eldest brother, at currently that's alive, he's 81 years old. He was in President Kennedy's honor guard. I had 2 nephews, one that served in Iraq and one that was stationed in Korea. So I come from a military background, and I'm going to tell you right now that if you're sitting there and you sign that piece of paper, take the oath of office, the allegiance to the country, that's part of what you're signing up for. Whether we like it or not, that's what it calls for.
I just wanted to add the information that as soon as a rocket leaves the US here and aims for Russia, there's an automatic trigger that triggers rockets there to be released. And I don't know if you ever saw this Cold War movies, even where this is displayed. In half an hour, you can throw away this world. And I feel with the Ukrainian people and everything, and it's not right and everything. But being emotional, oh, and we stick together through everything kind of high school morals is not going to save us or anyone or make less suffering. It will increase suffering around the world. So it's really important to stay rational and calm and cool like people did and during the Cold War.
It's probably more like
Can I
11
just
minutes.
answer? Like, the thing is,
Stunning, stunning,
we no
stunning.
one wants war.
Unbelievable.
The thing is, no one wants war, right? Like, I wouldn't want war either. Um, that's I don't think anyone in here that is saying that we should fight wants war. It's just sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. But I mean, honestly, if it's not now, when? Because we all know that he's not going to stop, or I think at least people here by now understand that he's not going to stop. So how many countries do we have to take out before we do something? Because I know that when NATO and NATO countries attacked, but I mean, don't you think that's going to happen? Do you honestly are you hoping that he's going to be stopping? So, or like, because I don't understand. I mean, no one wants war,
I,
but
But
So
it's
if
not going
the
to
Professor, I
timer
stop.
think
opens
I
up
don't
here
think it's a
for
given. He'll
rockets
carry on.
aiming for Russia, in half an hour the rockets are here in the US. And then you can pack your things, tell your kids goodbye. You can take a pill because living after that won't be worth living. So that's just a fact. Like it's not debatable. So now you have to think if you want to do that to this world, because there are also other countries that have nothing to do with this that will suffer just the same way. Like African countries,
But the
South
Russians know
American
that
countries,
too.
and
So
other
what I
countries.
think will happen if we had a spine, the Russian military will actually take Putin out. The chairman of China will call Putin and tell him to back off. Once we show a spine, then all of a sudden Putin will be forced to back off. We won't get to the point that you're talking about.
I don't know why we're having this
Exactly.
discussion really, because the governments have decided. None of us on this platform make any decisions. So this has been already decided what's going to
Yeah,
happen,
this is not a
and
decision
the
making
thing to
platform.
do, and the
But
thing to
Professor
do.
Asif, this is not a decision making platform. This is a discussive platform.
I
This is where
realize
people
that.
have
I
points of
realize
view.
that,
This is where
but
people have points of view. We are not the
yeah, no, no,
UN.
we can have points of view, but what I'm saying is the decision. What we should be talking about, how we can help the Ukrainian people, not how we can go
Right,
to war,
right.
because that's a decision we don't make. But
And
what
let's
we
not
can
forget
Professor,
help
those
is
Russian
Professor Asif,
submarines
we can
are
employ
sorry.
the
people,
idea
we
here.
can host people, we can take refugees. All those things that we can do. That's within our power. It's not in our power to decide whether we go to
Right.
war or not.
But Professor Asif,
I think
it's in within our power to make everybody else understand what does it mean to go to war against Russia in this case. Uh, Unless it becomes an existential threat to the whole world, nobody is going to wage war that can end mankind on this planet.
And let's not
We are talking about a level of war that nobody has ever seen. And if someone, even one person in the world, is willing to go into that level of a war against whole humanity, that is the only case where people are going to actually go ahead and wage war at that level. It's an all or nothing game. So the whole thing in supporting the Ukraine is going to be how to inflict the most damage against Russia without having to sacrifice the whole world to do it. That's the only way to do it. That's the only way where people are not going to end up destroying everything.
Can I just say something? My name is Tan. I was one of the people who demonstrated against the Iraq War something over 20 years ago. And from what I read, we were 2 million people in the UK alone, many more around the world. Virtually every major city had a demonstration against this war. And yet, democratic nations with false evidence went to war. So a lot of people are here saying that the Russian people, we should do this, we should do that. We should remember many Russian people didn't want this war, don't want this war. And a lot of the sanctions that we're putting on, a lot of the things that we're doing will hurt ordinary Russian people who we will have to do business with in the future. So those
Yeah.
who are advocating war, we should think carefully who we're going to impact. Democracies have gone to war. It's not just dictators and communists and authoritarian rulerships who go to war. Democracies have gone to war on false pretexts. It's a fact.
And what Katerina said earlier, I don't think it's half an hour. I think it's something more like 10 or 11 minutes, given that Russian submarines are a lot closer than most people realize.
I have to
But
count.
at the same time, I don't think the
So
U.S. and I know that the U.S. and Russia both know pretty much each other's hands. So I think they both know what can and will happen depending on the move. I would imagine that in a case of in the best case scenario is trying to coordinate some kind of a military coup to get Putin out. And maybe this is, the timing is being used right now, hopefully, behind the curtains to coordinate something like that so that there is no war, so that both sides are continuing to, negotiate together and just figure out that if indeed he is the the head of the snake, as they say, is to get that out and then try to negotiate and figure out who's going to, take over next. And I think maybe if they keep demoralizing, with their videos and seeing the rest of the world standing behind Ukraine, this will make it a bit easier to negotiate more with, potential leaders in Russia outside of Putin.
If I was a
Tyler, just two
Ukrainian in
very
Ukraine, sorry to interrupt, Ben, just one tiny thought. If I was a Ukrainian in Ukraine listening to this conversation, what basically I heard is that we're okay with them being the sacrifice in this game. And that's just
That's
speaking
fucking
plainly.
No,
bullshit,
Nicholas.
Nicholas.
No,
Don't
Nicholas.
grandstand
It's
like
No,
that.
nobody
That's
said
fucking
that.
bullshit.
so
Nobody
can I
said
just make
that.
two quiet
Jesus
comments?
fucking Christ, man.
So two quick thoughts from me. Firstly, to nod to Professor Asif, I think that remembering the great Stephen Covey's work, thinking about our circle of influence and our circle of concern at times like this is important, and making sure that we are not concerned about things we can't influence. I think that is a very valid point, Professor Asif, and let's not let fear overshadow our ability to actually do something like, I could take in one or two families here. I'm seriously thinking about doing that now. So good on the ground point. And I think the other point is, I don't think it's a given that if Putin has his way with Ukraine, that he will then carry on. I don't think that we should take that as a given. I'm not sure. I think there's a huge difference between what he's doing in Ukraine, which is disgusting, and I emotionally had the same urge as most people of let's go in and just flatten him. But logically, I get the argument. Come on, we need to stand back. It's not a given he'll carry on, and we do need to look at
I'm
the
not
wider
suggesting,
consequences.
by the way, not to be rude, I'm not suggesting that anyone wants to say this. I'm not saying that we don't all want not to have an acceleration. Well, all of those things are real. But when push comes to shove, they're really on their own,
So,
except for
Nicholas,
all
can
the
I
good
ask you a
stuff that we're
direct
doing for
question?
them.
Nicholas, would you go and fight for the Ukrainians now? Would you go and leave your job, leave your family, go over there, volunteer for one of their foreign legions? Are you willing to do that, Nicholas?
Some people have, and I'll
No,
give
So,
them
no,
credit.
Professor
Not
so
Asif,
some
do you mind
people.
quiet? I'm
You.
asking Nicholas a very precise question. Would he do it?
well, I'll give you something above and beyond that. If, God forbid, push came to shove, and this ratcheted up to a direct nuclear conflagration, I would rather stand there and stop someone who has this total power, because I don't think we'll get there. I really don't. And I am okay with understanding that there has to be a line. There just has to be a line. Not whether it's today or in the future, it's going to come. So I've got children, and I'm doing everything that I can do to make their world better, genuinely. And I feel that I would stand for the principles of when you can save people from a ruthless dictator who's going to use everything apart from the nominated weapon to get what he wants. And that's why I say I just understand that we're not going to come to their rescue. We're going to try, but there are going to be people that die unnecessarily because we can't check his power. We just can't, because he's willing to do anything and we're not. And that's what I'm saying, just being honest. I don't want war. I'm not advocating for any of this, but at what point do we stand for all the progress that we made? I don't believe that war has always been disastrous. I think that at the end of 1945, we went through this unbelievable age of growth and of expansion, and we've gone wrong because we've sacrificed everything for money. We allowed Putin to become what he became. We allowed him to go onto a sovereign territory and poison people. We allowed him to create an oligarchy that were allowed to buy our football clubs, that ruined our national game. We allowed all these things for money. That's why we did it. So I
We
just want
didn't
to be
allow this.
be
We didn't
honest with
allow
ourselves.
this.
Yeah, but we don't. I
Nicholas,
mean, Putin isn't
Nicholas,
the only
this is
dictator
not
that
stuff
we
that we
allowed.
allow or disallow. It's internal, politics, and whatever that happening in that country is meddling with their affairs. We can't just say we allowed this. We're not the world police. We are not at a position where we say you get to do this and you don't get to do
Okay,
that
okay,
just
that's a
because
valid position.
we have
That
some.
is not a valid point. We've done it through South America all the for many years. So to sit there and say that we
And we've
can't,
done we've done
we have done this,
we've
but
done
the
the same
U.S.
in Russia
government
also.
has its claws. So look, I'm not going to shout over you, but I'm just going to make my point: is that was not a very good statement because we have interjected our way of thinking into countries where we didn't need to be for various reasons.
Nicholas, can I
But,
quickly ask
but
you
because we've done something somewhere doesn't mean that we have to do the same thing everywhere. Our responses need to be calculated. Every different enemy, I'm not going to say enemy, but every different situation requires a different kind of response. Doing a
Sam,
one brush fits all kind of thing is not going to work. We're talking here again about an existential threat to the planet. It's like you are dealing with a killer comet that is coming to destroy the whole world, right?
can I just
It's
ask for
it,
clarification? Who
it's
is
that
the
level
killer?
of a
Can I just ask you,
situation.
Sam? Who's the killer comet?
Yes, sir.
Putin, or not doing anything? That's why. That's the question.
No. Nobody
And
said nobody. It's not an all or nothing kind of situation. You do a calculated response. You support the Ukrainian people so that they can help themselves. I don't know. A lot of countries have been smuggling weapons. You make this very painful for the Russian army to advance. You make this extremely hard for them to destroy the infrastructure of the Ukrainian people by supporting the Ukrainian people.
we would agree
Going
about
into war because
that.
that can end all wars and all life on this planet is foolish, even if this means that some dictator is going to try and utilize whatever arsenal he's got against the rest of the world. It is very painful to do these economic sanctions on Russia. When someone says, we're not
So
going to
is
sell you
Sam?
our,
So is the
let me
inter
just finish. Let
alia?
me land this. Let me just land this. When someone tells you that I am not going to sell you my oil, that doesn't mean that they're not suffering from doing this. They are suffering because they've got a product that they're not going to be able to utilize.
You
When
know,
they do
Sam,
that kind of thing, they are
you're right.
losing as
You're
well.
right in many
Making this
ways.
painful to
Nicholas,
them
I
as
just
well
wanted to
is
say,
the only way to actually move forward. Going to an existential war is not an option. This is a
it's
zero sum game in this case.
So we should assassinate
Nicholas,
him then.
just wanted to quickly say, remember what Henry Kissinger said. We only go to war or where we have a direct interest, right? And so our governments don't think emotionally; they think rationally when it comes to these things. But what we as individuals can do is help the Ukrainian people. We as companies can take people in. We as academics, can those students, not just Ukrainian, non-Ukrainian students who in the fifth year of medical school are no longer don't know whether they can finish their medical degree. Those are the kind of people we will need to bring into our organizations, our institutions across in America, in UK, in Europe. Those are the people. It's not so there will be people's lives are being lost who've spent 4 or 5 years studying and now they won't finish their degree. So we need to think about those. Those are the things that we can do about something. But we cannot decide on what NATO decides. We cannot even discussing is pointless because as Tyler said, they've already decided. They're not going to create a free air.
I agree with you. I agree that that's what we're going to do. And I have no doubt that we will act in our own rational best interest. That is fitness versus truth. The fittest decision is to stay out of it, and the fittest decision. Those are all things that are truisms. I'm just trying to say, and I've always tried to say, that let's skip to the end game. They're going to get rinsed eventually because Putin has unlimited power. So whatever we think, we can send them thoughts and prayers. But the question is, if they're not going to give up, if they're going to fight to the death, then they're going to be dead. And
Yeah, this
then
is
we're
Robert.
going to have to think about it.
When
And you want the
didn't
rest of the world to be part
didn't
of
we
it as well.
also say that when Rwanda happened in 1994, hundreds of thousands of people were slaughtered in a matter of couple of days, I don't remember well. Is that the entire world actually got up and say never again because of the humanity that we all just watched that horrific thing. I am in Rwanda today, actually. I came for a conference, and I think the Rwandans will disagree with a lot of what you are saying. Yes, sometimes we do make those calculated interference, but there is also humanity that we just watch and happen, and then later on we say we're not gonna let this happen again. But if the Ukrainians are, well, that was civil war, but if the Ukrainians are invaded and wiped out, are we going to say later on and say, well, never again? But while we didn't do anything, we didn't lift a finger to help something. And then, afterwards, we say, well, sorry, we wouldn't let it happen again. I think there are many things that we should consider, not just necessarily about, just self-vested interest only.
Okay, I wanted to If I may add segue. one last thing, which is the Cold War was not won by bombs and wars. It was won by bankrupting the Soviet Union. This is the other way to do this. This is how it needs to be done now. The Soviet Union did invade other countries, and there were proxy wars all over the world. The US was trying to go in advance in some areas. The Soviet Union financed the other side. And when they invaded places like Afghanistan, the US financed the other side. This is how these kind of wars at this kind of level can be achieved. Going into an all-out war against something like that, again, is an existential threat to life. We're not talking humanity here, to life. The next
Uh,
war is not going to happen between humans.
this is
Hey,
Robert.
Tyler,
Yeah,
can I read something? Can I have a second?
sure, go.
Yeah. So this is Ellie. I just wanted to put this in here because Ellie was his Nobel Prize winner. That you guys might know him. He died recently. He's a Holocaust survivor, and I just said this to Nicholas because I was actually driving, and the discussion is just so rich. I know it's animated, but it's also quite rich. And then we are discussing here. We're not having war, which is great. This is why we have words, right? But this is something from his acceptance speech in 1986 for the Nobel Peace Prize, right? We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. Sometimes we must, I'm just in the car searching it, sometimes we must interfere when human lives are endangered, when human dignity is in jeopardy, national boundaries and sensitivities become irrelevant. Whenever men and women are persecuted because of race, religion, and political views, that place must, at that moment, become the center of the universe. Now, what's interesting is some of the discussions that I heard earlier, which, very solid and very animated, also come from a sense of, and I think, during that situation, we didn't do this. So now we don't do this, right? So I think each situation, just a personal view, is a new assessment of where we are and where that line is, because yeah, there's 1,000 things we haven't done in the world, right? And the 1,000 things I sit there with my kids and say, we should have done this. And Rwanda is such a good point. I'm from Africa, and I was very animated by that, or very emotionally touched by that massacre. But this is a very, very important discussion to be had. I don't think it's one we just say well, the governments have decided. We sit there. That's what people are for. We're humans, right? We decide, we talk, and we have a civilized discussion. And so I'm glad you're having this discussion, Tyler. Thanks very much. That's just want to say that. Eddie was my friend Dov Seidman in New York. Once had a session with him, and I met this man. He's the most inspiring person I've ever met.
I like, I'm very fond of Cal Patel, and I love the point that he just made. And that's one side of that summarizes very nicely one side of what many people are feeling. I think the counter point is that for example, the Swedes, of whom I'm incredibly fond, as Swedbliss knows, are currently not part of NATO. And essentially, this Ukraine issue very clearly boils down to their not being in NATO. And Poland is. And my point is that this decision to not interfere is purely based on the lack of NATO membership status at the moment. No doubt the world is wishing that the Ukraine was part of NATO so that they could act on this. No doubt NATO's wishing they were part of NATO. No doubt the whole the whole civilized world is wishing Ukraine was part of NATO. But the technicality that they're not is unfortunate. However, the Swedes and the Finnish, as of today, things are changing. The world's changing very fast this week. But as of Friday, March 4th, Sweden and Finland are not part of NATO either. And
that's starting to become a liability.
Well, no doubt they're debating it. And Swedbliss, I'd love to give you 30 seconds to give us an update, or Johan, about how Swedes are feeling about they also not being part of NATO membership. And by the way, they were just buzzed by Russian fighter planes in the past 48 hours as well. But that's hardly news for Sweden. And that the fact that this is happening in this way is, if there's ever to be, trying to imagine a future where countries that might join NATO because of this, and maybe Sweden and Finland do, and other countries consider it, and hopefully, my point is, here's my real point: if we intervene now in Ukraine, as nearly everyone feels a sort of moral obligation to do, not a legal obligation, but a moral obligation. I think we're all united on that point. That we're strictly not doing it for the legal reason. If we do, and they are not part of NATO, then that in itself raises a new predicament, because Russia is likely to go into Sweden, and Sweden now has far less of a motive to join NATO if America does, or if NATO does support Ukraine. Sweden has much less incentive to join NATO, if you see my point there. And Sweden does fear Russia. I've had countless conversations in Stockholm about the Russians, and it's palpable, honestly. And I think if NATO supports Ukraine, it diminishes the purpose of NATO. It would, Finland and Sweden and the alliances need to be very clear and very defined, and for these types of purposes. And it's very regrettable that Ukraine's not part of it. I think everyone would agree with that. I think even NATO agrees with that. I think it's a tragedy of what's happening, and it's unfortunate and sad. But I firmly believe that any action on Poland, I'm familiar with this. I've been to Poland, I don't want to say dozens of times, but certainly a dozen times. And Poland there's an incredible amount of American military activity and NATO military activity in Poland. Tons. And there's not going to be any looking the other way if Russia even thinks of going into Poland. They'll be met at the border with incredible force. So I want to transition.
Can I answer to it?
Yeah, please. Yeah, Swedbliss, I want to give you the last word on that, and then I want to hand it to Carl, who's been, as usual, has his hand up forever with a point. Go ahead, Webless.
Sure. Well, as far as I know, I talk to so many people about this basically on a daily basis. I think the majority, definitely more than 50% wants to join NATO. And I mean, this is something I've heard way before this all happened. So, I mean, that's something that people have been questioning, I think, for a long time. The reason I think we are not right now is one of those. I mean, we're in one of those situations where Russia right now is threatening us. If we join NATO, they will attack us, right? So we're kind of, but also at the same time, if we don't, so it kind of feels like the fact that, I mean, they're worried that we're gonna join NATO. So that is also kind of hållhake, was that in English? So that is kind of like, that gives us an advantage, I guess. But the thing is, I think there is no doubt about it that the second, I mean, if they were to try to do something, everyone would want to join NATO. I mean, we're already, as far as I know, everyone has already wanted that for a while. But at the same time, you know, we don't want to risk making Russia angrier than they have to be. But you know, it's complicated because of the Gotland, you know, the island that they want. They really, really want the island, but at the same time, they really, really don't want NATO to get closer access to them. So, and especially probably not that island either. So I don't know what I'm kind of curious what you guys in here think about. How long does it take to join NATO, first off? Because a lot of people say that we have to join now, otherwise we won't have time to join it. And also, do you think in that case, because they want the island so that they get a good, I guess, so they can attack other countries easier, what would they do? Like, in what order do you guys think that they will do this? Because there's no way in hell he's going to stop.
Since I actually have some insight into the issue in Swedish as well, thing is that today it was posted in Aftonbladet, which is one of the major papers, that a majority of the Swedish people, they have done a poll, a public poll. We actually have a state government-driven polling authority that actually can call up people and ask questions. And we are way above 50% that thinks it would be a good idea to join NATO now. Finland has also had an poll, and they are actually going to have an election where they should we join or should we not, and that will be the upcoming months. And the thing is here that if Sweden would get into trouble, we actually have borders to both Norway, and that is a very, very long border into the NATO country of Norway, and they have harbors as well. So and we have Denmark on the other side of a very, very narrow stream in between Sweden and Denmark. So I guess that we will see Sweden and Finland apply for and probably accepted on the returning paper. I hope to not prolong that process. Johan.
Carl's been waiting patiently.
Tyler,
hold on.
President Biden is meeting the Finnish Prime Minister today.
No doubt.
In White House.
No doubt that's happening. That's the kind of thing that I would expect to be happening behind the scenes precisely. Thank you for that. Go ahead, Carl.
Thank you. Just quickly as an aside, I will never take offense if you skip over me and move on the conversation. It's fine. Trust your judgment to run the conversation as efficiently as it can be. There's a lot of conversation there about sort of whether we should go to war or not, and I'm not saying my personal opinions on that, but a lot of the opinions that were stated seem to rely on, obviously, the fear of a nuclear response. And this is something that I was thinking about early this morning. And there's a lot of opinion pieces saying absolutely yes, absolutely no, that this is likely, this isn't likely. There is actually a Russian document, a decree, the Federations of State Policy of the Russian Federation in the area of nuclear deterrence that Putin ratified in 2020, that its purpose was literally to define the situations under which Russia would respond with nuclear force. And the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-Proliferation did a fantastic review of it and analysis of it, because the original document is obviously in Russian, in English. So I think if anybody's worried about this, or obviously we're all worried about this, but if you want to sort of discuss this, I think it's very useful to go and look at that, because it's literally from the horse's mouth. It is their guidelines to NATO to clarify when they will use nuclear responses. You can either get Tyler, I did send it to you. I don't know if you're comfortable or willing to sort of pin the link to the document. If not, just Google the Vienna Center, the VCDNP Russia Nuclear Deterrence Clarification, or you can go through to my Twitter and there is a pinned link. There's a thread, go to the bottom of it and the link is there. You don't have to read my excerpts of it. You don't have to like or retweet or anything like that. I'm not after it, but I think it's a very useful article to read to get some qualified analysis of how Russia would respond and in what situations they would respond, and specifically what are the 4 trigger points. Like I think Katerina was saying, one of them, the automated systems, there are 3 other trigger points that they declared that would cause them to respond with nuclear force. Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah.
Just a quick side with Nelson Rockefeller, when he was vice president of the United States, even before that, actually, when he was governor of New York, was when he really pushed this through. Was in the 1950s. He lobbied JFK, saying, "Hey, nukes are a new thing. We should nuke-proof our cities," and did a whole lot of things about we should build bunkers, we should create defensive plans, we should do a whole civil defense initiative. And what's interesting is that was something under serious consideration, but then they looked at, well, how much does this thing cost? And it's going to be like at the billions or tens of billions of dollars. And they're like, yeah, we could do that, but mutually assured destruction with Mad Doctrine that would come later. It was early versions of that policy say maybe this will be cheaper to implement. It's really shocking how many of these political decisions were made on something of cost rather than technical feasibility. And what's interesting was there was afterwards, after they started going towards the mutually assured destruction idea, there was a huge propaganda campaign, frankly, to basically terrorize everyone, to saying nuclear war is the end of humanity, nuclear war will wipe us out, nuclear war is the end of everything, there is no coming back from that. What's shocking is when you read through the original documents and you see the testing videos and such from Los Alamos and such, it is possible to create nuke-proof structures. It is possible to create things where you have a nuclear war and you recover within a period of weeks. You can do so with very low casualty rates, less than we lost from COVID. The problem is that we have so many decades of misinformation around nuclear weapons, nuclear technologies, and what is possible and what isn't. It's very difficult to have geopolitical discussions about this because, frankly put, most of the discussions around this are not working with a shared view of reality. One last thing I want to add on that is that Nelson
That's
Rockefeller.
not true. That's not true.
I'm
I'm sorry to
comment.
interrupt you, but this
I
is
have
we
a
can't even
last.
recover
Can you let him
from a
finish his
supply
last
chain
comment,
issue.
please?
I have
Please, can
one
you let
last.
him finish his last comment?
The
Thanks.
last comment was from Nelson Rockefeller was the reason for pursuing a civil defense strategy was so that America's foreign policy would never be constrained by the threat of nuclear war from an adversary. That was something that was pushed very heavily, saying that that this is something that will happen in the future if we do not build these sorts of protections now. Now, eventually, that policy shift in America's policy has been very, very different since then. But it's important to look at, we did have a crossroads in history that we could have gone down a different path. It's maybe worth reconsidering some of those options now.
That sounds like it came right out of Dr. Strangelove.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
I host the
Dr.
Nuclear Weapons Club
Strangelove.
here on Clubhouse. We have lots of discussions about these all the time. Welcome to discussions on the subject.
Welcome to the theory, and your ass will never be put on the line because all you're going to do is talk about it. Thanks.
Ouch.
One
Can I?
thing that really irked me here is that we're talking about misinformation on the actual result of a nuclear war. This is not something open for debate. We have something called the Doomsday Clock that is specifically tied into this. It's not something. It's not a threat that we might, we can maybe survive or something. It is we cannot recover from a supply chain delay. We cannot recover if we had like a solar storm or something like that. We cannot recover for years, possibly. Taking into consideration a nuclear war is extremely naive in this case. It's like
we are really toying with our existence. And if we don't take this seriously as a whole human, as a species, we're not going to be a species anymore. We're not going to be on this planet to recover from it. That's it.
Supply chains
Chances
were
are we're
intentionally
done.
designed to be easy to break and being tightly tied to coupled to countries' economies, specifically as a counter-war measure. After the post-World War II order, one of the key parts was that any country that had a domestic manufacturing base was able to levy war pretty much indefinitely because they had self-autonomy, autarky as a core concept. One of the reasons why they switched heavily to a trade-based infrastructure after World War II as a counter policy was specifically so if any country declared war on another, it would be economic suicide. You see a version of that happening right now with
I am
Russia having
pointing
sanctions
at
on
the
it.
moon, not at my finger, right? Supply chain is going to be the least of our problems in this case. The least. You're not going to be able to find clean water. This is if you survive the initial blasts of on all centers, you're not going to be able to find anything clean for you to be able to consume.
Our
We are
current
talking again
civilization
at
our
yeah. Go
current
ahead.
building codes are when we have an earthquake happen, our buildings fall down. Then we upgrade the building codes so that they don't fall down during an earthquake. Same thing for nukes. Right now, they're extremely vulnerable. What's weird is when you look at the policies that keep them intentionally in this state. That's the key criticism that I'm making. It is possible to nuke-proof a city. This is not something that many people realize, and the documentation is all there in the public space, but it's not well
I'm
known.
sorry, but there is no place that is
What a
nuke proof.
strange thing to say.
Not even NORAD fort whatever thing that under that mountain thing. It is designed to potentially, withstand a direct hit, but it doesn't mean that it can if you hit it with something bigger.
All right, I'm
We're
doing a
again,
breakout room
again,
on
we're
nuke-proofing a
talking.
city. I'm doing a breakout room on this. We can cover more technical stuff. I don't want to take us off track, but I'll do a breakout room. Thanks.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I'll be joining
jump
that,
in
Chris.
on
Looking
this
forward
as
to that.
well here. We were talking about whether we're rational and whether we should stop this existential threat, and if we could have stopped this, maybe we would have done everything we could. But in parallel to what's happening in the Ukraine, the IPCC put out a report this week that says we are facing that climate change is upon us and about to get far, far, far worse, and is a bigger. It's going to be a bigger problem than Ukraine. We're all going to be Ukrainians, in the sense of having the death and destruction rained upon us. But it won't be by Putin. It'll be by all of us because we just choose to fail to even pay attention to the problem, even though we're able to pay attention to a problem that is visible, immediate, and caused by an enemy. In this case, Putin. But a much, much bigger problem that's not exactly right now, even though it is happening to a lot of people right now. 8 million people a year die from fossil fuels, and going to be a lot more than that in the future. It's not as visible, and of course, it's not caused by an enemy. So we really are not able to wrap our mind around it. And I find it interesting that on Clubhouse, the rooms that are focused on Ukraine have thousands of people or hundreds or thousands of people, and the ones on climate, even though the IPCC report came out last Monday, has dozens of people, I guess. And so it's as if with the climate, that IPCC report, it's basically saying that in a sense Russia has invaded every country right now, has started killing people, started destroying infrastructure, and we're all just going along our merry way as if nothing happened. And I kind of understand it. I know it's a flaw in human cognition that doesn't that we're not triggered by these longer term problems, even if they're enormous. But we really got to figure out how to start focusing some attention, because the thing is, it's not like we can't do anything about it. We could definitely address the problem. It would be great for the economy. It would be a lot of co-benefits for doing it. Yet we just actually are doing nothing essentially right now. And so I just leave that with you, just to think about that and how to get everyone as engaged on climate as they are in the Ukraine, and then we would actually be addressing it now. And the good news, by the way, some of the things you do for climate would help Ukraine right now, right? If we switched all of Europe to heat pumps, for example, that would help that situation too. But
Or
anyway, I just wanted to leave that thought. Thanks.
On that point,
or if we cut off all the technological supplies to Russia's oil industry, that could effectively shut them down as well. So there's ways of having a solution. You know, these systems break down, they need maintenance, they need replacement parts. Well, I'm sorry, comrade, we don't have those parts for you. That's a great solution, I think, and that was actually suggested by Gary Kasparov. So he seems to be coming up a lot, and leave it to a chess master to show us the way.
And I would like to, Dan, thank you so much. And you speaking up on that point is the right person. I have so much respect for you, man, and everything you've been working towards. So the distraction, and this is where humanity is. That we can roll back to the oil war because many people knew about how the Bush administration was rewriting the science books to, on behalf of the fossil fuel lobby, to kind of distract from this growing existential threat. So thank you for speaking to that. And one of the things that breaks my heart about this is just as a human, just emotionally, it is so scary and draining and heartbreaking what's happening in Ukraine. But, we can only put so much into our mind. And that's what I'm saying about just it's a distraction from this bigger threat that we all, know. So thanks, Dan.
Yeah, compassion fatigue is a huge factor here. So it's more of a marathon than it is a sprint.
It's the climate threat is the best argument ever to provoke a nuclear war, perhaps. So the next big article, we haven't, in fact, have not even done the first big article. And the first big article of today is from Brad Smith.
The air horn yet?
We need the air horn to keep the tradition. We have some very strong traditions here. Thank you, Carol. There's your air horn. Here's the first big story.
Right on brand.
And right on time. Just an hour and a half into tech news, we got the first news article of today, Friday, March 4th, from Microsoft CEO Brad Smith. It says Microsoft suspends all new sales of its products and services in Russia. 24 hours after Apple just announced the same. Kind of giving you a glimpse as to who's really got their hand on the steering wheel in that race. Saying that it will work with the US, EU, and UK to stop many aspects of business in Russia. Relatedly, Google stops selling online advertising in Russia, including on search, YouTube, and outside publishing partners, following similar moves by Twitter and Snapchat. And then Airbnb says it's suspending all operations in Russia and Belarus. And home rent, and then Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Mozilla, who all make, those are the four big browser companies, create a benchmark called Interlop 2022 to resolve browser compatibility issues identified by developers in 15 key areas. That's very cool. Next is from CNBC that Disney announces new ad-supported tier for Disney Plus, which will launch later this year. That means potentially a free or a subsidized cost version of Disney Plus. Make no mistake, you'll likely see the same for Netflix and Hulu and all the others, like we have with Spotify already. So you're now going to have, now we've really come full circle on the whole media landscape, where everything became subscription channels, and now they're going back to ad-based yet again, just like we saw in the cable wars back in the day. Then you've got The Verge with this story that after reports that Samsung was throttling thousands of popular apps, the company will release an update soon to let users control the performance of games. What's interesting about that headline? Here's what's amazingly interesting about that headline. That headline confirms that Samsung, the hardware manufacturer of the smartphone, was able to control or throttle the rate of data of particular apps. Why is that interesting? Because that proves that Google with Android or Apple with iOS could not only throttle the data rates of apps in Russia, but they could shut them down completely and turn those phones into fucking paperweights in 10 seconds if they so chose. And that is the move that I'm waiting to see happen as the nuclear cyber war starts to escalate, which no doubt will happen as a precursor to any actual hot nuclear war. You'll have a cyber war, which will evolve into a cyber nuclear war, which will be the bricking of all devices in Russia. And now you know for a fact that it can't happen with that headline. The next
It's
is Microsoft.
flashlight.
You'll have a very expensive flashlight. It'll turn all the devices into very expensive flashlights. Very good joke there, Vivi. Microsoft completes its $20 billion acquisition of Nuance. And the next one says that outside of Russia, Apple Maps and weather apps now display Crimea as part of Ukraine. Oh, interesting. Apple Maps is now showing Crimea as part of Ukraine for the rest of the world outside of Russia. Okay, interesting. Next is Germany-based Volocopter, which we were very fortunate to have the chairman of Volocopter join us here in Tech News Around the World about, 6 months ago, thanks to our friend Faraz, which is developing an autonomous air taxi service, raises $170 million as part of a Series E led by WP Investment at a nearly $2 billion valuation. And I imagine Faraz was partly part of that fundraising as well. The next is from the Wall Street Journal, who says they have sources. That means leaks, that Amazon has triggered a mid-March deadline for the FTC to challenge its MGM acquisition, after which Amazon can close the deal, which is going to go through. As Ken very eloquently pointed out, this is a total ridiculous waste of taxpayer time and money to even pursue this, because Amazon is by no means a monopoly in media. That's just absurd. It's totally stupid. The next is from CNN that experts warn that Russia can use satellite signals to geolocate and target Starlink users in Ukraine. That's crazy freaking interesting. This will be my next topic at my next dinner party. This is the interesting debate about how secure Starlink is from threats. Can Starlink exist against a state who wants to shut it down within its own state or in other states? For example, can people in China ostensibly use it without China knowing, and on and on and on? It's an incredibly important topic point. But the experts say that Russia could use satellite signals to geolocate and target the Starlink users inside of Ukraine. Elon Musk says the probability of being targeted is high. And he would know. The next is from the Wall Street Journal. They say they have sources, again, leaks, that a private equity firm called Hellman and Friedman take a 7.5% stake in Splunk. And Bloomberg says that Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile, that's America's three biggest mobile carriers, have spent $118 billion on 5G airwaves and network upgrades, compared to 61 that was spent on 4G. OpenSea, the NFT trading platform, confirms it is banning users to comply with U.S. sanctions after some users with Iran-based IP addresses say their accounts and NFTs were deleted. Oh, shit. And that is an interesting prelude to what is likely to be one of the biggest issues in tech in 2022, later this year, which is the same sanctions would certainly apply to Russia going forward. And Russia is no doubt contemplating their post-ruble economy based on potentially some forms of cryptocurrencies and whatnot. And as a result of that decision, the US and its allies will retaliate by trying to shut down whatever current crypto they might attach themselves to. And that could involve NFTs. And this could become a really interesting battle of now the Western world versus crypto in some sense. Stay tuned for the headlines.
Yeah, something else I'm curious about that, Tyler. I'm curious. Maybe the community here has more on this. I'm curious because money flows right through different countries, right? We know it can come. It can be oligarch money that flows into a company in the UK that buys a retailer, right? I know that firsthand, like in a sense. But so this money that obviously the US has decided to stop this because there's some sense that it's from that the money's from originally from an oligarch. Is that what I'm hearing on this thing? And if it is, then my curiosity is how much of the pump in the NFTs, because there's a pump in it, right? In terms of once you buy one, you want to pump it to other people. That's just built into the model, right? And that's why all these rooms are there and everything. So how much of that pump and the pricing is built on the fact that there's a lot of money just flowing through it, from places where people just want to clean it up? Because if you buy an NFT and then you sell it, you take that money, you've basically laundered it, right? And then you buy a house in, a villa in New York, or whatever, 10 apes, and then you buy a villa in New York, maybe. I'm just curious how much of that flow is going through, and I imagine people are watching it. People much more expert on this, and
I
that is
don't.
going to
Oh,
affect the
sorry.
market price of the NFTs.
So I think Donna here. I think the chain analysis looked at this a little bit. It's probably in just the going through exchanges is probably about 5% or so. Now that doesn't account for if you and I agree. I'm going to sell you something, or you're doing it with another wallet that's even your wallet, creating higher prices and then dump it off on other people, and then the price goes down. That's the wash trading of that. But I think chain analysis said that the pump or the wash trading from money laundering was about 5%.
Oh, that's just brilliant! Thanks so much. This is why this is the best room.
Could I just point out the inescapable
Can
irony here, and
I,
that is that
can I? You interrupted me.
go ahead, Co.
I
Sorry,
want to
go
give
go.
this, yeah, I want to give this room a pump, absolute pump, right? I don't mean a pump. I wanted to give it like, this is the only room I come back to now in Clubhouse, right? Because my friend Tyler and Cheryl, they run just a tight ship here, right? I've been to so many other rooms, and it's such a tight ship. It's inclusive, the quality is high, emotive discussions happen. It's just so solid. I'm so proud of being part of this community. I just wanted to say that. And just that, there's a question, there's a conversation. And, if you go check out Donna's resume, if you want to understand the credibility of her understanding, as well as everything she's doing now in all the new technology, these are, and Nicholas on here with his new platforms. I mean, on the crypto front, I mean, you couldn't get a better community at any point in time to discuss anything. So I just want to say that I haven't lost a lot of hair by not coming in here. We used to have this joke where if you don't go to tech news, you lose all your hair. I've kept my hair a little bit, but I'm aging a lot, so I might start
Yeah.
coming back. Yeah, thanks.
But Cal, it's not a surprise that you would enjoy this, as it being as you being a stepfather of it. Anyways, people tend to love their own kids as as it is.
Of
You're a bit,
course,
you're a bit
but I
biased.
just wanted. Sorry to interrupt whoever was speaking earlier. I just wanted to just give that call out because there's just a lot of quality that's not there. There's not a lot of quality in these big important topics, right? And they're using old methods of running rooms. And Tyler, Cheryl, like kudos, both of you. I know you've been persevering on this. I know I pop in and out, but I just got to give that to you guys. Just brilliant.
I just
Yeah,
want
hell yeah.
to
No,
highlight
and Cal,
you
this
have
was John.
your DNA prints are all over this, so that's my point, that you're seeing a reflection of yourself in it, no doubt. So go ahead, John.
Yeah, and Cal, you can interrupt me anytime. Your contributions to this room have been extraordinary as well, and double click on everything you said. The point I just wanted to make is, and given the talent in this room, how ironic it is that distributed governance models like democracy are at a disadvantage.
Did we lose John?
To hang up the call,
The phone call.
are at a disadvantage to the autocratic regimes that can move more quickly into the dominance of the cryptocurrency space. And so this will be one of the major front lines or battlegrounds between democracy and autocracy. Is, can democracy rise to the cryptocurrency opportunity fast enough in a cohesive way that prevents some of the economic consequences of the fallout from Ukraine?
Well, I would
If I might add a thought,
some of
just
the questions about the crypto thing if you want. I don't have to. It's fine.
Go ahead.
I just like
Go ahead, Nicholas. It's fine. It's fine. Go ahead.
I just got a quick thought because I have to leave the call soon anyway. The crypto is a feature of the new technology. The new technology is that which enables us to come together as people and have collective power and have a way to create new self-evident truths that can be, used so that we can all evolve and we can all avoid escalations like this. So I think it's the wider technology movement is going to empower a new era. And in terms of opportunities that we have with these great leaps in technology, they can be used for good and for evil, and we have to be aware of that. And it will challenge the existing system. And all I'm, trying to say is that we are in this meta game, and there are major players, and we should have a seat at the table, all of us, all these diverse voices that have differing opinions, and they're all valid. I do see the validity of wanting self-preservation, but I also see the validity of understanding that nuclear deterrent is about mutually assured destruction, and therefore it averts because mutually assured destruction is the deterrent. So in all the things, we need technologies that unite us because we are one. The golden rule is do unto others as you'd have done unto yourself. And there were two comments I wanted to make about Edmund Burke. We talked about Elie Wiesel. Edmund Burke said it well. The only thing for evil to triumph, that is required for evil to triumph, is for good men to do nothing. So I appreciate that we're all doing something by discussing these things. And then I wanted to also give you a quote from Otto von Bismarck, because as Twain said, history may not repeat, but it does rhyme. And he said, we live just as before Hitler. We live in a wondrous time in which the strong is weak because of his scruples, and the weak grows strong because of his audacity. So just leave you with those thoughts.
Okay, Alexandra. Did we lose Alexandra?
And just as a quick comment. Okay, never mind. Sorry.
I said Alexandra dropped out of the room.
Okay.
Okay. If I may, I think the idea of us just merely having discussions here, I think they have a huge potential to galvanize into potential action, because it is a public discourse that we're having across many nations all over the world, and I think leaders listen to this. So I don't think that it's just merely a conversation we're having. We're setting the foundation for potential action. So I think it's an important place to come back to. I find myself almost coming back here like some sort of crack addict, but I do find there's extreme amounts of value here. So I really appreciate the space, Tyler, Cal, and everyone else. So thank you, everyone.
Somebody just provided some really interesting value, and thank you to whoever sent this in. I think it was Frank. Yes, it was. It's the Finnish president just tweeted out 1 hour ago a photo of himself with America's CIA director William Burns in Finland, and he tweeted saying, he's meeting with President Biden later today, and had a wonderful meeting with the CIA director William Burns. I'm sure that's just they're talking about Squid Game or whatever, and then apparently he's going to be heading to the U.S., or the defense minister of Finland is taking a 2-day visit to the U.S. On Monday. Gee, I wonder what they might be cooking up over there. It sounds like
He's getting training.
I have to imagine there's some talk of NATO happening, and if Finland joins, I think that would make it even more likely that Sweden would join. I think Swedbliss and Johan would agree with that assessment, and especially if they did it both simultaneously, because it would divert the focus from you-know-who. So, very interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Frank. And Other interesting shares that people are sharing is David Crace shares this one, that a Swiss city signs a partnership with Tether to enable citizens to pay taxes in cryptocurrencies. The Swiss city of Lugano is known for technical innovation and is aiming to establish itself as a hub for cryptocurrencies. And for those who don't know, there's actually quite a bit of truth about this. And it was actually Zurich that was earlier on trying to become a real global crypto hub. But Switzerland does make sense logistically around crypto, because Switzerland is a financial capital in its own right, and it makes sense that they would kind of have an interest in the future of currencies. And the next article is from Valerie, that Nano Satellites made in Glasgow, Scotland, now can listen into signals from ships and aircraft, tracking their location as well as details of their origin, destination, and purpose. So I'm retweeting that one to the Tech News Twitter account for those who want to deep dive on that.
That's really good for any GPS spoofing, because relying only on one satellite network has caused some problems in marine logistics, and with some actors not necessarily playing fairly. So that's great news.
The next is from Jason Henkhaus.
But these are nano satellites, so their capabilities are definitely limited by their size and their power. So it's going to be interesting to see how much coverage they can provide.
Yeah. Jason shares this one about an investigation shows that Mark Zuckerberg's election funding violated fundraising regulations. Jason, are you still with us on stage? Yeah, on Twitter Space. Can you comment on this one? Investigation shows Zuckerberg's election funding violated bribery laws. It says it's already been confirmed by a study that Zuckerberg's decision to donate $420 million to various leftist elections officials across America to help them accommodate COVID during the 2020 presidential race essentially bought the vote for Joe Biden. Now a report in Wisconsin has determined that those actions also violated the state's bribery statutes. Okay. And then the next one is from Katerina, that scientists watch a memory form in a living brain. While watching a fearful memory take shape in the brain of a living fish, neuroscientists see an unexpected level of rewiring occur at the synaptic level. And indeed, people do get traumatized, and their brains do get rewired.
Wow. What was
One
the
step
mechanism
closer
used?
to. Sorry, go ahead.
I just retweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account if you want to deep dive on that one. Like this one.
All right, thanks.
Germany switches off a telescope on a Russian satellite. Germany stopped all science cooperation with Russia over its Ukraine invasion, but space station work continues. But they've just stopped the telescope on the Russian satellite in that partnership.
No,
and then,
really, how is this helping, Tyler? They switched off their telescope.
I feel bad for the astronaut. It's not like they can say, "Okay, fine, I'm out of here."
There is no astronaut on the satellite.
Well, I mean, like the ISS astronauts, or cosmonauts rather, are in a precarious situation, similar to what happened when the Berlin Wall fell. There was a moment where there was no nation that they belonged to, so I suspect they're going to be in a similar situation. So the satellite is just the beginning of this kind of conflict as everyone else detaches.
Okay. Carl had this one. It says, the secret police, local and federal cops built a shadowy surveillance machine. An investigation by MIT reveals a sprawling technological sophisticated system in Minnesota designed for closely monitoring protesters. I think tech newsers are not surprised by that headline, but maybe others might be.
That was Tyler. I think after that shooting of forgotten the guy's name,
yeah.
That gentleman's name who was shot. It was after that, right?
I imagine so.
It was after George Floyd, I believe. Yeah, it is a monster article. It does a really, really deep dive on how it's been used statewide and what apps they're using and everything else. It's a long ass read, but it's worth it.
Does it mention Clearview?
Not that I saw, no.
That would seem to be one of the most important links in that chain of keeping
Does it
tabs.
mention Apple or Google?
It mentions another app. The name off the top of my head I can't remember. Begins with I something that they're using to basically the security forces in the area, the police in the area, were gathering information, personal information, pictures about demonstrators, protesters, journalists, biometric data, and then using this particular app to then distribute it statewide and sometimes out of the state. And it's the kind of thing that we're used to hearing about and attaching the letters FBI, CIA, and NSA in front of, and in this case, it's actually the state police level, and yeah, pretty scary stuff.
I'm wondering if this is Tan. I'm wondering if, and I'm not going to mention his name for fear of libel, that if a famous VC ex-PayPal guy is involved in all this, because he's investing a lot of money in this space, isn't he?
Well, here's an article. Founders Fund raises $5 billion in 2 new funds across early and late stage investing. That's from Bloomberg. And the White House is giving Ukraine real-time intelligence after previous warning of info sharing stepping over the line. And we have been sharing in real time, says Press Secretary for the White House, Jen Psaki. Said yesterday, without getting too far into details of what we do for obvious reasons, we have consistently been sharing intelligence that includes information the Ukrainians can use to inform and develop their military response to the Russian invasion. That has been ongoing, and reports that suggest otherwise are inaccurate. Interesting. Are there reports saying that the U.S. isn't doing that? And why is she so keen on making sure that you know that they are doing that?
That's really strange. The last time there was a conflict with Iran, a Russian communications ship actually stood in between the missile ships of Americans and the Iranians, and they gave advance warning to the Iranians. So this is something that both sides do.
It says the admission appears to contradict statements from other U.S. leaders who have said America is not sharing real-time intelligence with Ukraine to avoid getting directly involved into a war with Russia. Quote, that steps over the line to making us a participant in the war, says Representative Adam Smith, House Armed Service Committee chairman, said Thursday. Interesting that she intentionally is proving him wrong, essentially, because she would have the authority to do that. With that
Our hand is in the cookie jar. I swear it is.
Exactly right. Why is she so adamant about making sure that people know that we are engaged in supporting?
We have all the cookies. We have the cookies. There is no doubt. We're handing them out.
It's kind of an interesting political move, but that plays an interesting it's an interesting puzzle piece in my own personal conspiracy theory that America has played an interesting role on the information back channels leading up to this whole shitstorm as it is. So the next article is there was a whole bunch here. Facebook and Instagram are now blocking Russian media in the UK based on a request by the UK government. Twitter and TikTok have not yet responded to the UK's request, but no doubt we will see that headline by Monday. Because the UK basically has to do this separately from the EU. The EU did it all this week. Everybody complied, from YouTube and TikTok to everybody. And now the UK is requesting, and everybody's complying, to block RT and Sputnik and other Russian media outside of Russia. The next one is that the U.S. Surgeon General, according to the New York Times, is formally requesting big tech, quote unquote, to turn over information about the scale of COVID-19 misinformation on their platforms and hand it all over before May 2nd. And Twitter will reopen its offices on March 15th, and the CEO is touting the advantages of returning for the culture while honoring Jack Dorsey's work from home forever promise. So he's not breaking Jack's promise that you can work from anywhere forever. He's definitely singing the praises of coming back to the office. And the the Internet Protocol Consortium rejects Ukraine's request to cut Russia off from the global internet, saying the proposal is neither technically feasible nor within its mission.
Right,
And
but didn't they reject that like a couple of days ago? RIPE also rejected a similar request.
yes, they did.
Looks like Ukraine is just sending out these requests to everyone. Just cut
They
them
are.
out, cut them out.
And many of them are complying. They seem to be having quite success with all of these requests. ICANN seems to be notable in not sort of agreeing to the request. And
It's
it is true that this
a
was
bad idea.
already decided 48 hours ago. However, this is from CNN, which traditionally lags by about 48 hours.
Right. It's a bad idea. It's just, playing to the like in a specific way in the Russian scenario here, where you will be subjecting the Russian people to only the internal propaganda about what is going on. And that is really not in anybody's best interest. You want people to know, and you want people to be able to make decisions, maybe rise up against their government, like a lot of the demonstrations have shown. So, and these bodies should literally be outside of these kind of conflicts. They are providing a service for the rest of the world. It's I know they might be in their capabilities of doing something like this, but it is not a good idea, no matter how you look at it.
Okay, next
That's
is
arguable. So I understand your point, and in principle, totally understand your point, and it is a channel to help cultivate the anti-Russian, anti-Putin propaganda with the population. But that's something that I've been trying to learn more about this last few days, because that's one of the chess moves, is the role that a internal distress is going to topple Putin. But what I've been learning, not that I'm an expert, listening to people who are saying they're experts, is that propaganda that Putin has. In fact, this is from a Ukrainian. It's from Anna. Anna mentioned it. She mentioned, and she's Ukrainian, and it's a data point. But she said that there's a lot of there's decades and decades that Putin's had the ability to have that propaganda really take hold. So I mean that's part of the challenge here is just how likely will there be a revolt, right? So, but I understand your point, but it's just it's that versus it's all a bunch of calculus. Thanks. Sorry for.
I would love to
You're
hear
right, David.
JT's Jonathan opinion on whether the balkanization of the internet that might result from isolating Russia um, might result in would be to their advantage in that they would have better control over what's allowed on their internet and still be able to hack into the larger internet system itself. So that could backfire against the intended purpose. And maybe Ben has some thoughts on that. I'd love to know what JT thinks as well.
You're right. This can potentially backfire. That's number one. Number two, regarding the propaganda machine working for decades doing this. Yes, they have had the time to do this, and but that doesn't mean that there aren't people who are rising against what is happening there because they're able to access like avenues like or like international sources and know what is going on in the war, knowing that this was not concluded in a day or 72 hours or whatever that they were fed at the beginning. That kind of stuff will help people make better decisions regarding their leadership. That's the second thing. The third thing is um, many countries have isolated their internal internet from the rest of the world. This includes like Iran, China, and some other countries. And in the case of actually isolating them from ICANN or anywhere, they do have the capability of running autonomously internally. All they need to do is just exercise their internal DNS infrastructure, point everybody to that, and that's it. They've got their own internal internet where they can feed you whatever they want, and with no access to the real internet, people will just, that's the only thing that they can consume. So there
Does,
are ways to do this, but they're already. I think they did some war games like few weeks back, specifically targeting this kind of scenario, and I think they even prepared to provide the state-run propaganda machine even more to their people. Sorry, land my plane.
doesn't China more or less have its own sort of intranet,
Yes,
countrywide intranet? It has its own
yes.
apps. It has its own equivalent of probably Clubhouse, I'm sure, no doubt, equivalent of Facebook, Twitter, and will maybe Russia go that way as well?
the Great Firewall of
Mhm.
China. Yeah.
Okay, next up, I've got a hot story coming out just in the past few hours. Honda to develop EV cars with Sony, two of Japan's biggest companies. As cars become more connected than ever in the age of electrification, automakers joining forces with technology giants to make the integration of new features as user-friendly as possible. Seems to make a lot of sense. Ford and Google have done cool things together, and now we've got
With Volvo.
Yeah, but for the last few years, Sony has been kind of showing off their prototype car, so it's nice to see that they have an industrial partner to actually make this a reality.
and Reddit.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I was going to say Reddit bans links to Russian state media outlets across its entire site for all users worldwide, and ads that either and also ads that either originate from Russia or target Russia. Go ahead, Carl.
I was just going to say the previous point, the Honda and Sony, two things. One, I'm strangely optimistic about this. I don't really know why. I think it could be quite a cool joint venture. But key in this that I took away from it at least is that obviously Honda's going to handle all the manufacturing and whatnot, but Sony is going to handle the mobility service platform for the resulting company. And that to me suggests that they're right at the beginning. They're already focusing on things like automation and ride sharing and that sort of thing. So it could be quite exciting.
Okay, we're basically through the tweets for today, and I'm going to leave you with one of my own to end on that I'm pinning to the top of the room. Oh, invalid request. Are you serious? You're not going to let me pin that link? There it goes. So I just pinned it to the top of the clubhouse room for the 300 plus people over there. I realized we have another whole bunch of folks hanging out on the Twitter space, and hopefully I can pin it over there too. I'll tweet it from my Cheryl. Hopefully Cheryl can get it over there. I'm heading back to Stockholm in a couple weeks for the 10th anniversary of my monthly tech event there. And because it's the 10th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Which Carl, by the way, came over from the UK for one back in November or December.
It was an enormous amount of fun, and everybody was really kind and gracious, and it was very educational. It was good fun.
Yeah, Amay came to that one as well from Amsterdam, and I know Swedbliss has come to some recently. So for those who might be up for hanging out in Stockholm, the 10th anniversary would be the ideal one to attend. This one will absolutely sell out because our special guest is none other than Sequoia Capital, who many regard, myself included, as kind of the apex predator in the tech investment world, and I mean that in the best possible way. And the venue where we will be is the absolute premier, mind-blowing, brand new, can't believe it, unbelievable venue in the center of Stockholm at Sergels Torg, which is I can't believe there's a venue in Sergels Torg. That's how central it is. And it's called Space Arena, and it has, as you can see in the photo of the event by clicking on the link above my head, it has a 20-foot curved 8K video wall for the stage, which is, I think, even bigger than the video wall behind Steve Jobs at the Apple keynote events, by the way. I'm sure it is, actually. I'm told it's the largest in Europe. So that's what we have for the venue. as we have the perhaps the best venue in Europe. And
are you going to have to give some sort of like, I don't know, assistance or help or training to, because obviously you're going to have pitch decks come along.
That's right.
In PowerPoint on little 1080p screens, and then you're going to stick it on the 8K one, and there's going to be massive blank space outside.
So it's two separate files. There's a background file and then an active center file for the PowerPoints and everything. So
fantastic.
We've already got the technical sorted on that point. And
okay, and the discount code is TNATW.
We could do something like that, yeah. So, in fact, it's free to attend. You can register and get a complimentary ticket, but that doesn't guarantee you entrance. That puts you in the first come, first served for the whatever seats didn't get reserved. We have a reserved seat to guarantee a seat. There's a total of 400 seats. You can reserve one of those 400 seats for the very low price of about $10. Or you can take your chances and get the free ticket, and then you queue up with everybody else who's queuing up to see what available seats weren't reserved, of the unreserved seats. First come, first served of the unreserved seats. But something tells me that we will get 400 reserved seats. But
well, the last one, Tyler, was a double negative whammy of COVID, combined with the fact that you did a double event in 1 month, and it was still very busy. You still had over half filled, didn't you? So,
well, that venue had 600 seats, and this venue only had 400.
Sweden has lifted all measures, right? COVID measures.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So there you go. Hope to see you there.
Kyle, you're not doing a virtual thing for that also, so like people could watch it online, or you're not doing that?
We might, because this particular venue has a dedicated live streaming suite in the back corner of the room with and state-of-the-art equipment of all kinds, precisely for those types of purposes. So it's very likely that we will. So fingers crossed. I have a meeting with the tech team next week, so.
Would that affect how? Because it's quite a candid event. Yeah. People speak sort of freely, and it's quite relaxed and whatnot. Would that change, given that it's either recorded or streamed? Would that change sort of the nature of it? No.
We've been doing the event for too many, 10 years every month.
Yeah, that's what I figured. That's good.
It has its own rhythm, regardless of if it's streamed or not.
Hey, Tyler, do you have any events, informal events going on either day before, day after?
No. Oh, somebody invited me to participate in an event the day after for a green tech event at Norwen Foundation, which I believe Carl went to meet our friend Sid, who lives in Stockholm.
No, not me. That may have been Ellen, potentially.
Yes, Ellen did meet Sid at Norwen Foundation, which is a gorgeous venue in its own right, and it's a green tech incubator hub, the largest in Europe. In fact, they just opened another one in Uganda. And we're going to do an event the next day on the March 24th over at Norwen for green tech. Okay, so there you have it. Happy Friday, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and hopefully see you on Monday, where who knows where the world will be when we join again Monday. Hopefully in a better place. So have a great
weekend. Thank you. Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you. Take care,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you.
Have a
Take
great
care.
couple of days.
Thanks, guys.